thank everyone for being here on Saturday night, even though there is a sports game happening over there. I know you're here to watch some debate, so I thought we'd give it to you. Thank you, judges, for coming out. We really appreciate your involvement. And thank you, my partner, who, thank you for recognizing my nickname is Swag, and so really appreciate it, and also for debating. He's been a great partner. And thank you for my opponents for coming out and bringing up some great arguments that we need to actually really evaluate. Okay, let's get right into it and talking about the disadvantage. They say that if we go through with this case, then we're going to have this trade-off happen between sports and between debate. But if you actually look at the plan text doesn't cause the trade-off. We're not saying that we're going to take all of the money from these basketball programs or all of the money from these football programs. All we're saying is that the UTK debaters need to have a protest in which they can gain recognition so they can get what they need to have a sustainable program. And they assume that that funding is going to come from these sports programs. Not necessarily. When you look to the funding that we get from our colleges, I don't get my funding from anything dealing with the sports programs at all. I get my funding from a completely different department. So we can't necessarily assume that it's going to trade off with these sports programs. We love sports. They are great. Now, granted, I'm not an SEC fan because I'm a Big 12 girl, Boomer Sooner, but you know, it's something that we do support sports as well, and they're not mutually exclusive. And so because of that, you have to see that this disadvantage does not link. Well, you might say that, yeah, if we completely traded programs, you can see these impacts, but these impacts simply aren't going to happen because of the plan text. Yes, I'll take your turn.
Yes, so are you suggesting that people don't drop it like it's hot when it comes to trading sports for debate?
Can you rephrase your question?
I mean, my imagination is when you say drop it like it's hot, we're talking a mass movement. So, if there's any clarification you can provide as to your intention, I'd love to hear.
Okay, whenever we're saying drop it like it's hot, celebrate what your mama gave you, it's a local issue. So like what we're saying is that the UTK debaters need to celebrate what they have in their talents. We're not necessarily saying that the entire UT campus has to celebrate the communication abilities of the debate team. Because our actor is the UTK debate team, they are the ones who are going to drop it like it's hot and celebrate what their mom gave them. So because of that, that is where where you can't necessarily make out that there's a direct, they don't necessarily go against each other. And so because of this, we can see that this disadvantage doesn't leak, and it's not going to take interest away. And another point on this is that they kind of give a lot of stories about how, well, you can do this or the other, but in the same way, like, I'm sure most of us who did debate also played sports. My partner's on the rugby team at his school, so it's not something that a student is going to disagree and be like, well, I'm going to do debate, but I'm not going to play sports. We have 2 kids on our team that are on sports teams and also on the debate team. It's not mutually exclusive. And again, our plan text doesn't cause it to be, so this set doesn't link. And then what they did get into was, well, which is better? And this is a valid question to talk about, and saying that what can the debate team do for an educational institution? Well, we are an SEC school that has a very successful sports program. There are other schools who have very successful debate programs. University of Kansas, Baylor University. These universities have intense debate programs in which they are seeing major comeback from it, in which they're training people, in which they're going to go into professions like lawyers and businessmen, in which they're able to give back to the school. While it might not necessarily be on the quantity level of number of people who will give back for the debate team, it will give back in the end. And these people will care about their college because they actually had a personal experience where they learned through this process, and not just going and enjoying a great football game, which I love football. But it's a completely different experience going to a debate tournament and enjoying that educational benefit than going to a football game. And in both instances, you can have camaraderie. In both instances, you're going to have unity. It's just on different scales. And again, we're not necessarily getting rid of one and using the other. And while they said that sports are important for gaining revenue, yeah, we agree. We're not taking that away. It doesn't link. So let's go back to the topic, or to our case, and our actual plan text, which wasn't necessarily evaluated on will a occupy the stadium actually work. That wasn't necessarily addressed, so we have to grant that kind of follows through in saying that the movements are followed. If you've been following the news talking about these Occupy protests, it is made it so also the issues of corporate greed and things like that are all over the news, and which people are actually thinking about them. And it's these types of movements, even on a macro scale or a micro scale, in which people will start following them, and they will start being like, hey, what's going on? Why are people sitting in the football field? And so it's something that's kind of out there, and it's going to cause people to pay attention. Not only to other students to pay attention and be like, hey, what's the debate team about? But also for the leaders at UT to pay attention and be like, hey, what's going on with the debate team? Why do they care? And it's because this is such an important program. We all know the benefits, and I don't think that's debatable. We all agree, it's kind of a moot point, that debate is a great activity in which we all are seeing the benefits. And so, on which, going on to the solvency, they granted our solvency saying that we don't necessarily have to prove, or that we did prove that the protest would be successful because it would cause awareness. That wasn't addressed, and so just pull that across, except they did talk about how we don't want to have riots happening on UT campus. By simply sitting in a football stadium, it's not necessarily going to cause riots. We're not saying that we're going to go storm the next building or whatever. We're just going to have this protest. It's a quiet protest, yeah.
So I'm sorry it seems like I'm asking the same question, but I really must ask, what exactly are we here to prove if we're not proving that people should shift from sports to debate, that UT should simply just go into a program?
Okay, yeah. One area in which we need to debate is how do we get these programs to a point like this? This is a big question for all of us, especially Vincent and I, when we're having to evaluate how do I get this point from dealing with a school that cares about sports to care about this debate issue. And so it's a valid question, and it's something that needs to be debated. What's the best way to do it? Is it protest? Is it by going to alumni and getting funds? Like, it's something that is a very complicated issue when you actually start trying to solve this problem as students. And so that's mainly where we want the debate to head, because it's something that's beneficial for all of us in understanding the inner workings of a debate team and how complicated it can really be. But also on the plan text, they said that we don't want to have riots. But again, this is just a peaceful group that will go into the football stadium and actually just protest the injustice, or not the injustice, but protest the action. Yes, I'll take your time.
So I'm assuming with your Occupy movement that you want to create just that, a movement. So how would you create a movement with large magnitude without redirecting attention from the sports program to policy debate?
Okay, it's going to be a movement predominantly kind of a micro movement. It doesn't have to be on as large of a scale as the Wall Street movement. And what I mean by micro movement is not necessarily like it's only like a few people, but it's a movement among the people who are in charge and the people who can change things. And that's where the movement's going to be happening. And so because of this, we can see that we're going to see advantages that were not necessarily addressed, and the disadvantage that doesn't necessarily link. And we're going to actually see that we can get inspiration for teams like Vincent and I when we're trying to do the same thing that UTK can do, and by implementing this plan. So I thank you for judging and ask you to please